Hey, Dreamer here, and this is a list of every single Ultra in Dragon Ball Legends from worst to best. This is obviously not a new concept for the channel because I've already made this video as a short, but now it being a long-form video, I can actually go in depth and more in detail as to why these characters get the placements that they do get on this list. I don't want to waste too much of your time. These characters will be rated based on their performance in the meta, so very PvP-centric here. A lot of these characters, if you put them in PvE content, they still have some level of usability, because PvE isn't really that prevalent in Dragon Ball Legends, and PvP is definitely the core aspect of the game. So that's generally how I'm going to be ranking these characters. Starting off at number 21 with Super Saiyan Goku, the free-to-play one. Now, you may hear the number 21 and that may not make a lot of sense, especially when you go back here, you can actually see that the list only goes to numbers. There are only 18 Ultras in the game. So where did the other 3 come from to make 21? That's actually because I'm going to be ranking the characters like Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Goku, Legendary Super Saiyan Broly, as well as free-to-play Omega Shenron as their own characters separately from if they have or if they don't have their platinum equipment, because it genuinely makes that big of a difference in my opinion. And so yeah, I mean, like, that's basically, I'm basically going to be ranking them separately, so you're going to see them appear twice on the list, just with that added note of whether or not they have their platinum equipment or not. So, moving forward here, back to the topic at hand here, Super Saiyan Goku, obviously the first Ultra to ever be introduced in the game, with no platinum equipment, no nothing. The character is supposed to be a DPS unit, right? But he kind of fails at doing that. Alright, back to the topic at hand, actually. My neighbors were just being, like, really loud. It was really weird. I don't want to talk about the stuff that I heard there. Let's just get back to the video at hand here. So, like I was saying, Super Saiyan Goku is obviously supposed to be a DPS character. That's generally the purpose that he's supposed to serve, but he fails at really being that just because he's just not as strong as he once was. His stats aren't as impressive, and now with so many Ultra characters in the game, his stats just aren't that impressive anymore. Couple that with like his blue card, right? Let's take a look at this Super Dragon Burst. It's a really weak blue card with no additional damage, and on top of that, it's a charging forward blue card. Now with this Goku, one thing that I do remember, like very much about the character, is that he doesn't actually have any kind of special cover change nullification. And so if you put this guy against like Ultimate Gohan, LF Ultimate Gohan, he's gonna suck because like his blue card isn't gonna make it through. Neither will his ult, just because he just lacks that main thing that a lot of characters have nowadays, which is just cover change nullification. It's really not exactly present for the character. And on top of that, he's just like not very impressive. He's old, he's aged, and I think that's really why he's kind of stepped down. Especially now with the release of Turles. Turles is currently on the featured list in PvP, and even if he isn't, like, Turles is just really powerful defensively, and that doesn't really work with this Goku who's trying to do damage while he has color disadvantage, so it just doesn't work. Moving on to number 20, I'm going to be speed blitzing a lot of these weaker characters, but number 20 is actually Vegeta. Working up the list from the last time I did this, because Vegeta was actually on the lowest point of the list last time I did an Ultra kind of like list just like this. He's also a DPS character, but he, just like Goku, he fails to do so just because of his lower stats, being really old. You know, he just kind of just, on release, he was actually really strong. And one thing that I will give him credit for is that he doesn't actually fall victim to the same thing that Goku does, where with Vegeta, he actually has a ranged blue card, and it's not a projectile either, so it's probably the strongest blue card type, which I guess works pretty well. It's just kind of weak in terms of effects, and he doesn't have a platinum equipment either, so you don't really see a lot of the, like, this is about as strong as he's gonna get, which is not that much, especially the character being dated like he is. Vegeta isn't really gonna show off a lot. His cover change is also really weak. I almost forgot about this. His cover change is not comboable with his blue card, which is a joke, right? It doesn't even make any sense to have an Ultra whose cover change doesn't even combo with anything unless you're trying to stop like a blue card or an ultimate, in which case it's fair. But if you can't even do that, but you're just cover changing against regular strikes and you can't combo with your blue card or green card because his is also an attack, that just sucks for the character. It obviously means that he's going to be held back in a lot of ways that a lot of other characters in the meta aren't going to be, which is why he's on the second last place on the list. Moving on, it's going to be Omega Shenron. This is him without his platinum equipment. He's supposed to be a defensive character, right? You can see here defense type. He's supposed to be a defense type character, but he kind of fails at doing that just because he's just missing a lot, right? If you compare him to his platinum equipment version, obviously one thing to note is that with a platinum equipment, Omega Shenron gets so much more healing, he gets endurance, and generally he has like a better tanking capacity, whereas he's missing a lot of that, as he just has those regular ultra free-to-play character stats, which isn't that impressive now in the current meta, and he definitely needs his platinum equipment in order to fulfill the role, that defensive role that he's supposed to have. Already another interruption there. It is kind of annoying, honestly, because I've really brought my A game for this one with minimal stuttering thus far, and it's a real shame because the recording is experiencing a bit of trouble here. But moving on to number 18, right? It's number 18 on the list, so 18th strongest, which is like fourth weakest, sorry. It's actually going to be Super Gogeta, so a bit of a shift from the previous list as well, because Gogeta does take a bit of a step down here. The thing about Gogeta is that he's weak to meta green units, and what I mean by that is that there just has been kind of a surge of good green characters, right? You can think of Super Saiyan God Goku as one of them, kind of, and who else would there be? Like Evil Boo. I think I'm forgetting someone. Oh, and Zenkai Dragon Fist Goku, right? Like these are really strong green characters coming up against someone like Super Gogeta who's blue. Obviously, he's going to be put at a really big disadvantage. You can still use his mechanic, his unique gauge, in order to generate an infinite amount of blue cards. It still does work, and some characters do a decent amount of damage with their blue cards, so having the ability to generate that infinitely can obviously be made to work with this Super Gogeta. One thing that I will highlight though about the character, like a general weakness, is that Gogeta is supposed to be a last man standing character. He gets an ult, I'm pretty sure it's here. He gets an ult, a second ult, when he enters the battlefield as the last man standing, and on top of that, he also gets a buff, namely type neutrality, whenever he enters the battlefield while there is a defeated ally battle member. And so obviously that's like pretty decent, but the thing is that second ultimates aren't as strong now in the meta as it once was, especially when this Super Gogeta released initially, because now almost every single character, be it offensive or designed to be defensive, those characters will have kind of like an additional effect in their unique abilities that basically either debuff the enemy in a big way or buff themselves in a big way whenever the opposition chooses to activate an ultimate arts. And so you're actually kind of discouraged from ever using an ult more than once, because the buffs can activate several times, and even if it's limited to once and you're activating the secondary ult first before using the main, it's still gonna pop the effect. And so in that sense, this Gogeta's offensive abilities as the last man standing is really outdated, and he doesn't really play that role of the team anchor as well as he once did, sorry. Which is why he's now so low on the list, and lower than he was initially when this Ultra list was made a few months ago. Moving on to number 17, it's actually going to be his counterpart here, Super Vegito, right? The thing about Super Vegito is that he's weak to a lot of meta red units. Some that come to mind would be Gohan Beast, but not that much. Probably the logical option or thing to really bring up would actually be Legendary Super Saiyan Broly, the transforming one, because, you know, Broly's just really strong. Like, damage-wise, his special move is just capable of doing so much burst damage, and Vegito does have endurance, but endurance is pretty outdated, especially with someone like Broly, who, like I said before, could do a ton of burst damage with the ability to nullify endurance on top of that. It's a pretty deadly combination for the character, and it could lead to like really easy one-shots. This character could definitely use a platinum equipment. I already have him at 7 stars, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. The thing that I really want to talk about here is that Vegito has a, I don't know, like outdated counter, I guess. A way to really talk about it is that a lot of the more modern Ultra characters who have the ability to counter, you can just do it while standing still. It'll just pop automatically, and you can even combo it with a special move. This Vegito, I think his counter mechanic really didn't age very well. It kind of sucks, and it's objectively worse than the counter mechanics that we see a lot more in the meta. Because, first of all, the opponent needs to use a specific arts card, which is already not that easy, and then you need to actually use a strike arts of your own, and at least the damage that gets dealt is automatic, like as is. But I just think the requirement for it is just a little too heavy. It just kind of doesn't really work. Now, in the current meta, when characters can counter so easily, obviously such a counter like Vegito's doesn't really work very well. On top, I mean, like, I don't really know how to defend this character. He was fun. He was fun when I used him first, and this is cool. He has the ability to nullify his element factors with his green card, so at least he has that with him. And oh yeah, this is something else that I really want to talk about, is that the only way he gets special cover change nullification is through his counter. So if you don't activate his counter, he doesn't get cover null, which just makes him suck, because so many good LF and Ultra characters have the ability to gain cover null really easily, compared to this Vegito, which is just, it's hidden behind such a difficult condition. The only reason that this guy's ranked above Super Gogeta, sorry, the one placed below him, obviously, is because he has better stats. He's a much newer character in comparison to Super Gogeta, and so if you do pit the two characters against each other, Vegito's probably going to come out on top, especially with a much safer balance between offense and defense in comparison to Super Gogeta, who's much more offensively leaning. Moving on to number 16, though, we have ourselves Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Goku, who's much higher on the list than he was initially. And the only reason he's here is because first of all, he's trash. Like, without his platinum equipment, he is very, very sad, is what I'll say. He's not necessarily a bad character, it's just that his mechanics are very old and it just doesn't really work for the current meta. It's just that his ability to seal enemy strike arts, if I can find it here, I'm not really sure where to find it, right here, seals enemy strike arts every time when faced with an enemy. This is a really strong effect, and you can really play around with it, especially because now so many characters are starting to have blast cover changes, so it's going to be a lot easier for you to kind of orchestrate the fight using this Goku's ability to seal the enemy's strike arts. But that's it. That's like the only value that I can really point out for this Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Goku without his platinum equipment. His sustainability, I think, definitely improves with his platinum equipment, his damage as well, kind of like his ease of combo. But without it, he's really, really weak. I think that's a bit overly dramatic, a bit hyperbolic there. He's not that weak, but he's not strong enough to compete in the current meta without his platinum equipment, and honestly I don't really think it's really worth it. If you want to just use this sealing ability for like that utility effect, you can try and experiment with it, but I don't really think it's worth it without the platinum equipment, without him actually being a usable third character on the team, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, overall this Goku isn't really too bad, and like mechanics wise, he's actually like pretty unique. So it's cool that he got a platinum equipment so that he can be usable once again. It's just that he's not really that, like, he's not all that, you know. The only reason he ranks this high is because he still has that usability, and it's actually quite relevant in the current meta with the characters that we got that just all of a sudden all of them have blast cover changes, you know. So sealing strike arts just really works to put them on the same team together. Moving on to number 16. This is actually going to be a bit of a shock, and it's more of a situation where I don't know where to put this character. It's Hit, and the upset is pretty huge here. Hit, first of all, I don't own the character, but he ranked a decent amount higher than how he is now. Like in the previous list, he actually ranked pretty decently high, but unfortunately he has gone down a fair bit, and the reason for that is because he's weak to the current meta blue units. So you can think of characters like Super Vegito, characters like the new Turles, who, you know, they have their own strengths and weaknesses, and I don't really think that this Hit is capable of really covering against that. On top of that, he's not really viable for any team. So one thing worth pointing out is that whenever you want to build a team, you obviously want to put on the best characters, the best options. He's not the best option on any team unless you're making something like Universe 6. Rival Universe, maybe, but considering that Hit is already the way that he is, unless he gets a platinum equipment, he's gonna be replaced by much more modern characters that will be released in the future. He's horrible for powerful opponent, horrible option, I mean, and an even worse option for Universe Rep, so I don't really recommend him really putting him on any team, and that's why he's so low on the list now, is that he's just missing that presence in the current meta. But the only reason that he's higher than like Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Goku and some of these other characters is because he does have like a pretty unique mechanic, on top of it actually being pretty strong, and if it's put in the right hands, it can obviously do decently well. And he also has better stats than a lot of these older characters below him on the list. But I don't know, like there are like a bunch more tanky characters nowadays who are capable of even like surviving him, like his time skip with the ultimate at the end. And so I don't really think that the character's value is being like, I don't know, like shown off at its maximum. And because of that, he's really low on the list, and the current meta really doesn't support him or create an environment for hit where he can really show off. Moving on to he was number 15, so I guess now we're going to go with number 14, Kid Buu. Now, his defensive ability is not bad, it's certainly annoying, that's what I'll say. His unique gauge is pretty like straightforward, where basically if you hit him while his unique gauge is full, he heals, and that allows him to basically become near immortal. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. He becomes almost immortal, and so I guess that is kind of something worth pointing out, even if it's not as strong as it once was. Kid Buu obviously relies on endurance, and like I said before, yellow characters who rely on endurance aren't really that good, especially now with red legendary Super Saiyan Broly running around, who has like the ability to deal a ton of burst damage, on top of having endurance nullification when he does. He has a pretty unique healing ability with his unique gauge, obviously, this Kid Buu. And I have found that he is kind of usable for LBR if you really want to force it, Legends Battle Royale. He does have some usability there, he's there for some like niche teams, obviously, but he's kind of aged in terms of his mechanics, but his knockback green card here also adds that usability like I said before. But again, Kid Buu's just kind of aged, and so I don't really think that him being good in LBR justifies him being anywhere higher on the list than where he is right now. So yeah, this is kind of his position as is. I'm not really going to change it around too much. The character has a lot of potential. With a Platinum equipment, I definitely think he can really be thrusted into the meta, you know? But without any kind of further enhancements, this is about as high as I would put Kid Buu. Now moving on to a pretty interesting option, Goku Black for the 13th character on this list. I'm counting down, obviously. But the reason I put Goku Black here is because he's green, and there haven't been that many good blue units to really show up. You know, I've talked about Super Vegito and what's his name, Turles, just now. But Goku Black's offenses are still pretty strong, and so you can see it kind of be shown off against these blue characters who obviously have not that much type nullification, type neutral. So he does have that. He's very modern in terms of his design, because he has several ultimate arts, and so even if the enemy kind of blocks out the first one or the first two, he can still release another one through his unique gauge, and so it does create that situation where Goku Black, when at his maximum, he can really dish out a lot of damage, even if he doesn't do it as well as he once did. Obviously, he has blast armor on his strikes, which is something worth pointing out, because this is like really strong. In certain situations, close range situations, this is how you gain priority. A lot of characters obviously have blast armor, but there's just like a specific trauma with me attached to this Goku Black. Really strong character, really annoying. And while he was meta, he was like pretty much unstoppable. It's kind of hard to erase this character, but I do think he deserves to be placed above all of the characters that I've mentioned previously. So yeah, I mean, like, there really isn't much to talk about the character, other than what I've already mentioned beforehand. So moving on to number 12, and this is also going to be a bit of a surprise, and honestly, I really don't know where to put this character because I don't own him. It's going to be Legendary Super Saiyan Broly without his Platinum equipment. He does have decent defense, and one thing that I do like about this Broly is that while he was pretty annoying on release and he aged out fairly quickly, he's a character whose defenses don't rely on counters, right? It's just a regular defensive unique gauge where if you take damage enough, the unique gauge gets full, it refreshes, and it gives you an effect, it heals, it debuffs the enemy in a lot of ways. And because of that, I do think this is like really strong, because Nowadays, so many characters rely on being able to do counters just to make sure that they can defensively compete with the characters who are doing a lot of damage, whoever it is they're facing. But this Broly relies on just being able to take hits and just that in order for him to kind of withstand and provide value for the team in the fight. Obviously, he's not as strong as like him with his platinum equipment. The platinum equipment for Broly does give him much more ease with his unique gauge, and it makes it a bit more enhanced. It makes it stronger. And without it, he obviously is a lesser version of the character. But I do, again, like I said, I do like his lack of dependence on counters. He can just work well on his own, and he can just take hits like a damage sponge, even if he doesn't do it as well as he once did, especially when he did on release. Moving on to the next character, I guess, because there really isn't much to talk about this character that I don't own and I've never actually used. I'm actually going to be moving forward to Gogeta Blue, and I don't actually own this Gogeta Blue either. My summons for him have sucked, and so I've never actually ever tried doing it ever again. I've just decided to save my Chrono Crystals and skip this guy entirely, and that's for good reason, because while he does have solid offense, his green card is really scary, because it gives him cover null. It allows him to just perform really easy combos, in my opinion. It's really scary to see that animation pop out, even to this day, but his counter is also really aged. He obviously counters ranged attacks. Where can I fight here? He counters ranged attacks, and now a lot of characters actually have moving forward, dashing forward, you can call it whatever you like, lunging forward special moves, and so you don't really see this animation all too often. Unless you're talking about a character who relies heavily on strikes, then yeah, I mean a character who relies strongly on blasts, then yeah, this Gogeta is probably going to shine a bit more, but he's like the OG counter character, and because of that, it's definitely much more aged in comparison to every other character. And on top of that, the only character that I can think of who can really counter this Gogeta in a big way is the other Gogeta Blue, the fusing one, the one from the 6th year anniversary, because not only does that Gogeta have element advantage over this Gogeta, but there's obviously that assault chain ability that nullifies his counter, so it takes away a lot of the character's value. And I think that fusing Gogeta Blue is still pretty prevalent in the meta. Like, I still use that character on my main team, and so because of that, I don't think this Gogeta Blue is as good as he once was, and it warrants him being put down on the list, much farther down than he was placed initially. I do think this is the proper placement for the character, especially because his presence has kind of dwindled. Presence in the current meta has kind of dwindled. You haven't really seen much of him, and rightfully so, because like I said before, the character has aged, and he just isn't as strong as he once was. Moving on to number 10, actually, we're at the top 10 right now, which is, we've actually gone pretty quickly through the list, but here we've got Super Janemba, and he's kind of low on the list. I'd say he's if I put him any higher, it would be weird, and if I put him any lower, it would also be weird, so this is probably the best placement to put him. He's similar to my reasoning with Super Gogeta. He's a blue character, so he's weak to a lot of the modern green characters like Evil Boo, Super Saiyan God Goku, and a lot of these other Zenkai green characters like Super Saiyan 3 Dragon Fist Goku. So he does have that weakness. He does have the counter though, similar to Gogeta Blue's, except his is obviously the strike version of it. Let's see if I can find the animation right here. Not the animation, the text right here. In a way, the counter is kind of stronger and weaker depending on how you would judge the character. It's kind of centered around a timer. So with Gogeta Blue, you obviously need to get hit in order for the gauge to fill up, whereas with this Janemba, all you need to do is wait and just buy time for the gauge to fill up. But like I said before, he's supposed to combo with his ultimate. Like that's generally like the gimmick for the character, is that when the counter activates the first time, it's supposed to give him the ult, and you're supposed to pop it right away and deal an insane amount of damage. But like I said before, with characters nowadays, having the defensive ability to survive ultimate arts through debuffing the enemy, canceling their buffs, or buffing themselves and making sure that they can tank the damage, this is obviously not as strong as it once was. So the character's offensive ability is really kind of outdated in a sense. And he's also really dependent on his counters. When you compare him to a character like Broly from before, Janemba doesn't really have that much value outside of his counters. He can do a decent amount of damage with his regular combos, but it's nothing too impressive. I guess the special move can do a decent amount of damage under the right circumstances, but this Janemba isn't really as impressive as when he looked on released, and so that's why I've put him here. But I do think he's still like somewhat usable, and like I said before, there's really nowhere else to put him. This is about as like accurate as of a place as you can put him. Quickly returning back to Legendary Super Saiyan Broly, it's actually him with his platinum equipment. So this is actually the first character to show up on the list with platinum equipment. Alright, Vegeta, thank you Vegeta for the comment there. But here we're going to go into Broly's equipment if I can find it really quickly. I don't own the character, so I need to check the archive just so that I can go into a bit of deeper discussion as to why it gives Broly a bit of extra value. Let's hope I don't miss it so I can save a bit of time. But here's Broly's equipment. Gives him health and regular stats, and it also gives him buffs for his for his unique gauge effect. It destroys an enemy card, restores additional health, and gives him damage, but it only activates twice. I mean, it's a decent amount, right? 25%. And look at this. Charges his own unique gauge by 50% upon landing a special arts hit, which is insane. Because like you're not. I don't think you can combo with Broly's green card. We can check right after this, but personally, I don't really like Legendary Super Saiyan Broly, so I'm not really going to check. I'm not going to go too deep into the character, but you have to admit this is actually pretty insane. Like, the character is built around having defenses and like the ability to debuff the enemy with his unique gauge, and the fact that it fills by 50% with his special arts is just broken. On top of that, he has like a universal cover change, and it pairs well with this platinum equipment effect that gives him an extra 20% to his unique gauge and nullifies unfavorable element factors. This is obviously the gated premium effect here, and it's alright. The extra damage, the cost reduction, and I'm pretty sure what is this, like additional effects, more effects for the unique gauge, another 50%, which is insane, and also card destruction immunity. So yeah, the platinum equipment does give him a lot of value, but the thing is I don't really think a lot of people own Legendary Super Saiyan, like Broly, like the Ultra Legendary Super Saiyan Broly, and because of that, his presence in the meta isn't really shown, and that's why he's ranked so low as an Ultra with the platinum equipment. He's just not present in the meta. But him obviously not being dependent on counters, like I said before, and him having a much stronger unique gauge effect, and you know, the character's kit kind of being weaved together in order to synergize a lot better with each other and making it like a really cohesive character. That's definitely something that the platinum equipment does a good job of doing. But that's about as far as it goes, and that's why Broly is at number 9 on this list. It's still a pretty decent placement, especially because he's now in the top 10. But speaking of another top 10 character, at number 8, we have Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Goku with his unique equipment, not his unique equipment, with his platinum equipment. Okay, Vegeta, jeez, damn. I mean, we can just go into the equipment list. I already own it, obviously. I don't have him at 7 stars, so I haven't really seen Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Goku for myself at full potential. But here you can see that he gets his basic stats, extra ki recovery, and health with this platinum equipment on top of this like other effect. This I'm sorry, I blanked there. This Vegito Blue, Ultra Vegito Blue effect that gives him like a ton of healing, type neutral, as well as main ability ceiling for the enemy. It's pretty strong. On top of that, he gets cover change nullification that activates twice, 30 timer counts when he enters the battlefield, which is really, really strong. The fact that it's not a premium effect is really awesome. And here you can actually see that he gets extra unique gauge charge rate, so it basically, his fills up a decent amount faster than it once did, and so you can really take advantage of his vanishing gauge restoration, his healing, and his card draw with the green card, obviously, with Goku's unique gauge. And on top of that, if you do have him at over 7 stars, you get additional damage and basically like a better ease of combo for the character, because here you can, not only does he inflict substitution counts on the enemy, he also gets more cards. So he has that ease of combo, really, really strong stuff, and it really helps support. Oh my god, he really helps. I don't know, like, it gives him better sustainability. It makes his combos a lot easier to perform, while also keeping the utility that gives him value in the first place with his ability to seal the enemy strike arts. But moving on here, who's the next character again? Right, Vegito Blue, which is really sad to put him at number 7 on this list, but he's, like I said before with every other red character on this list, he's kind of weak to the blue meta characters. He does have pretty accessible type neutral, which is a point worth discussing in my opinion. Has it with this green card here, right there. And so it's actually pretty consistent if you have the kind of like the ability to predict the enemy's moves. But his mechanics have kind of aged. Like, one of the things that gave this character value was his ability to reduce the enemy's vanishing gauge to 0%, if I can find it here, when he enters the battlefield for the first time ever. Right here. And it's obviously not a bad effect, but he's a pretty old character for, like, he's like, how old is he? Like a year and a half now, almost? And most experienced players would be able to predict what he will do next. And so this is no longer like, it doesn't have that kind of surprise element to it. It doesn't have the element of surprise that it once did on Vegito's initial release. He still has high stats and solid damage, especially with his ult, even if it isn't as strong as it once was. So that's why he's actually still pretty high on the list. I'd say that he's like not that bad, but obviously his standing in the meta isn't as prevalent as it once was, simply because he has aged and there are so many new characters who have been introduced who are like a fair bit stronger than this Vegito. And did I forget to talk about this? But obviously his Rising Rush is supposed to be able to nullify Endurance, if I can find it here, right here. It's supposed to nullify Endurance, but now that kind of sucks, especially considering that there's a much better effect from Super Vegito, LF fusing Super Vegito, who can essentially not only do this, on top of it never being able to be guessed, so it has a guaranteed 100% chance of landing that this Vegito does not have. So that does put him at a disadvantage, and it shows off just how much power creep, how strong it is in Dragon Ball Legends, because this effect that was once really strong is now like very meh, and it's still like relevant. It's just not like as impressive as it once was. And now for the surprising number 6, it's actually going to be Omega Shenron with his platinum equipment. So brace yourselves for the Vegeta quote here. Yeah. Okay, that's enough. Go right in. This is the first platinum equipment to ever be released in the game. And I gotta say, this is really, really strong stuff. Because not only does he get health, inflicted damage at a base, right? You don't even have to have him at 7 stars. He's a free-to-play character, so you should have him at 14 stars by now. Unless you're like new to the game, in which case, take your time, don't worry. It gets extra card draw speed at a base, on top of additional stats. This cover change effect is actually pretty decent. This disrupt effect is really strong, with the draw speed nullification, as well as, not nullification, reduction, as well as the card destruction here. And on top of that, he enters the battlefield, he draws a card, gets key, which does give him that like staple ability that all good ultras should have. On top of this effect right here, where he gets additional damage when all allies are GT, and this is obviously where you should be running him. He's the defensive character for GT, if you're excluding the character at number 1 on this list, obviously. But he also gets an additional endurance for 50% health, which is actually pretty decent. And this is actually pretty, like, this is what I said, what I was talking about before, right? He cancels the enemy's buff effects when they activate a special move, ult, or awakened arts. And so, like I said before, he has like all the makings of a strong defensive character. Sorry, I entered the wrong page, damn it. But yeah, generally that's why the Omega Shenron is really high on this list. He has a very clear role that he plays on a specific team, and that gives him a much greater sense of purpose. I don't know, like, what else is there to talk about? He has a stronger defense, he's, like I said before, useful in his teams, and another thing to consider is that he gets like a lot of healing and endurance with... It's just a much more enhanced version of the character to like a very significant degree, and because defensive characters don't get power crept as easily, this Omega Shenron is still like very, very strong defensively for the GT team specifically. Like for other teams, like maybe not, that may not be the case, but him being on the right team and having the mechanics that he does have, it makes him a lot stronger and just generally more viable in the meta. But moving on to number 5, this is like the top 5. And most of the characters here are deserving of such a rank. We have UI Sign Goku, so moving just quickly because I don't really think we need to explain the character too much here. He's a strong one, he has like strong one-shot potential because of his ability to, what's the word, I forgot, well, the slang term that's used to describe this ability that he has. the cover change nullification that, you know, it's not necessarily where the enemy stops performing a cover change, it's where you actually continue to pin the enemy with an additional attack, and it combos into an ultimate arts, which, like I said before, isn't as strong as it once was, which is why UI Sengoku is kind of low on the list when you compare him to his initial position in the previous list. But yeah, his unique gauge allows him to evade and basically have that mid-combo save ability, which is really strong now, considering that we've kind of returned to the part of the meta where having like really long combos is generally what makes a strong character, so having the ability to interrupt that is also really, really strong. And he's generally really easy to use, with his green card giving him cover null and a card draw. It's not a card draw speed, but he actually gets a card with it. That's actually like pretty strong on its own. And so generally that's why UI Goku is still pretty high up on this list. His defensive abilities, I guess not necessarily defensive abilities, but like evasive. His ability to interrupt the enemy's attacks, it's just really strong, still kind of prevalent, even when like cover null is still really, really present in the current meta. But yeah, I think him having like that offense and defense is worthy of, it makes him worthy of the number 5 spot on this list. Moving on to number 4, and obviously this kind of sucks, but yeah, it's Golden Frieza. Golden Frieza has like really strong defensive ability here with his comeback that actually also does a lot of damage. It actually really hurts. Like the damage actually like does. It's pretty decent, especially with the type neutral as well. It can generally like really bring you down. Damn, like there's really no way to describe it. It just hurts, and it can really shift the tide in battle, especially when you manage the character properly. The presence of the Emperor here is really making me trip up on my words, but if you can wield this character properly, he's probably going to proc this effect later down the line in the fight, and so at that point, like, you can just lose hope being this Frieza's opponent. What else is there to this Frieza? I actually don't really remember. I guess his combos are pretty easy. It's so easy to draw green cards with this character, and so, like, look at this, like, Vanishing Gauge Restoration as well. So strong with the ease of combo as well. So offensively and defensively really good, and like I said before with Legendary Super Saiyan Broly, he doesn't rely on counters to be defensively strong, and that's why he's really high up on this list at number 4. Moving on to the latest shiny new toy, it's gonna be Ultra Turles. I have like so much air in my like throat. I actually can't like speak a whole sentence without like gulping. I'm gonna do this to the best of my abilities. He has strong defense just like Frieza, and he obviously has the comeback ability, which is really, really strong, because it's not endurance and it's not a revive either, so there isn't any disrupt to it. Generally, that's a point that I give to comeback characters, is that they don't have an endurance or a revive, so there isn't actually any effect in the game that counters it, which makes it inherently much stronger. On top of that, he has really high offense. Like, there may just be like an effect of being in the featured tier, but he's tough to beat, and this special move does a lot of damage. His ult actually does a lot of damage as well under the right circumstances, and his combos are really easy, especially when every single time you see Turles perform a combo, he always kicks it off with the green card. His mechanics are pretty unique in that he consumes his unique gauge, and overall I'd say that the character manages to balance offense and defense really well, not to mention his really annoying effect with his comeback is that like he drops so many debuffs. It's an actual short story here, like a literal flavor text for a legendary character. But yeah, like generally that's why Turles is pretty high on this list. Not only is he featured in the current meta, but he has the strong mechanics to really back up his position as is. I do think that he has the potential to age very well, just like Golden Frieza. He's probably going to get moved down a slot or 2 when the best unit in the game comes out, but that's about it. Like, I do think that this character will be able to hold his position very well. And this is obviously like one of the bigger upsets, one of the bigger updates, I suppose, to this list. Super Saiyan 2 Gohan at 2nd place. He obviously has like really strong offense, and his combo potential is insane. With his green card, that's obviously a knockback green card, on top of it also giving him a card, which and no switching, by the way, and not no switching. He inflicts sub counts, but it's basically the same thing. Really, really strong stuff there. What else am I forgetting here? He has a really strong last man standing effect, because not only does he get his ultimate arts just like Super Gogeta, yeah, that was like really low on the list, but he also his ultimate arts is a lot stronger. He has that counter on him. His kit just synergizes really well, and he has a strong counter with his unique gauge. Obviously, he has the ability to destroy cards. Let's see if I can find it. Right here. It actually destroys the enemy's cards, which is really annoying if you don't have card destruction immunity. And he also has the counter blue card. Who can forget this annoying trash mechanic? It's so disgusting. I hate this. But, you know, being the person who uses Super Saiyan 2 Gohan fairly often, it's also really fun to use. Like, I can't lie. I mean, yeah, generally the character is perfect. And not to mention this, right? Oh my goodness, I almost forgot about this. The armor break blast cards that just are passed on to the entire team. It's really strong stuff, and generally that's why he's really close to first place. And the only reason that he isn't in first place is because, like, number one, who you obviously can guess who it is just that much stronger, and that's going to be Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. He's obviously the character who I'm running as like my anchor, my main character on my PvP team. So this ranking is like fairly deserved, and it's definitely unbiased because he has pretty strong offense with amazing combo potential. His card draw speed is buffed, I'm pretty sure, when he enters the battlefield, if I remember correctly. Let's see if I can find it. Yes, right here. And he also has cover null as well, on top of him having like an increased card draw speed. Like, it's really strong stuff, and he even heals. Like, what am I looking at here, man? Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that Gohan did have endurance, and Gogeta doesn't have any kind of those like survivability mechanics, but he doesn't need it because his counter is insane, right? Not to mention that when he's the last man standing, his unique gauge charges up a lot faster. Let's see if I can find the text. I don't know if I can find it here. I'd have to look for a fair bit. Let's see if I can find it though. I think it's worth it. Right here. Oh, sorry. A little too excited there, but right here. So as the last man standing, he actually gets his unique gauge much easier, and the unique gauge effect, obviously like the most broken stuff that you've ever seen in the game. Just so insane, absolutely disgusting. He has a universal counter that counters everything except the Rising Rush, and it even works as a universal cover change that I don't think it can actually be nullified when you have cover null, because it's considered as a unique gauge effect rather than a cover change effect. So it's a really strong universal cover change, and like his base cover change as well, like not to mention, right? His base cover change is really strong because when you pop it against a Striker Blast, he draws a blue card and he can actually combo it right away, and it does like a really good amount of damage. Against opponents that are much more vulnerable, it can actually be a one-shot move. Like, it's really, I just realized this video is going on for almost an hour. Jeez, man. But yeah, I mean, like, it's a worth it discussion, right? The blue card here is insane as well. He has the ability to restore his vanishing gauge, which is obviously really strong. It allows him to stay in the battlefield for extended periods of time. Not to mention his knockback green card, which actually inflicts no switching, and also gives him a lot of cards to work with. But yeah, generally this Gogeta, his balance of offense and defense is just so strong, so high on both ends, and I think that makes him more than deserving of the first place slot on this list. But let me know in the comment section down below what you think about my placements on this list. Let me know if you have any kind of like rebuttals or disagreements with how I've placed these characters. Obviously, it's kind of subjective because I don't own some of these characters, so I may actually be glossing over some of their mechanics. Let me know in the comment section down below if I have made that mistake. If you have any additional criticisms, also feel free to let me know, because that's what the comment section is for, man. If you enjoyed this video, if you have any additional comments or kind of if you want to start a conversation about these Ultra characters, then yeah, feel free to do so in the comment section down below as well. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, and if there's like a reason you don't really like the video, then feel free to leave a dislike as well. Like, it's perfectly fine. And make sure to leave a comment in the comment section down below as to why you don't really, why this video kind of missed in terms of your interests. And don't forget to subscribe as well, because I am on this daily upload streak. I am on this daily upload streak while I'm on holiday, while I'm on break. I'm gonna be away for a while once again, and I'm gonna be going on break. Like, break as in I'm not gonna be uploading anything on YouTube for a while, But when I do come back, I'm gonna be coming back strong, hopefully. So make sure to subscribe to make sure that you're updated and notified when I do eventually drop another video. Well, yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this one. Bye. Thanks for watching.